Hey everyone, I'm Maggie McGrath, senior editor at Forbes. Votes are being counted across the country tonight, and in 10 states, voters weighed in on ballot measures regarding abortion. We have some early results on some of these measures, and here to break down legally what happens next is Harry Nelson. He's a healthcare attorney and the founder of Nelson Hardiman. Harry, thanks so much for being here.
Great to be with you.
So, as I just said, a few of the states with abortion ballot measures have had results come in, and I want to start with Colorado's Amendment 79, which creates a right to abortion in the state constitution and allows the use of public funds for abortion. So voters voted yes on this. From a legal standpoint, what happens next? Tonight is just election night. When does that ballot measure become reality?
So essentially, the ballot measure in Colorado, like a number of the other states, is actually going to amend the state constitution. So the result of the ballot measure basically is going to set in motion the legislature to formally amend the state constitution and formally make the right to abortion part of Colorado law, making it essentially a permanent action and part of the state constitution. So tonight really is decisive, but the process will actually take a couple of weeks in the rest of the year till it formally takes effect.
And I want to ask about that use of public funds for abortion. That is not language that we see in every state or even in a lot of polling. Can you give some context around how common that is and how radical or not radical that is?
Yeah, no, that's a significant change from what we've seen in the other states. Obviously, the decision to spend public funds, normally we're talking about Medicaid program funds, which are state. Medicaid is part federally funded and part state funded, is significant because depending on which party is in control of the White House and the Department of Health and Human Services, federal funding may not be available. So making state funding available through the Medicaid program is essentially one way of guaranteeing access, and that there will actually be a way for patients to access Medicaid providers in the state of Colorado to be able to have access to abortion. So it's a big deal. I think that it has not been a feature in other states because it's sort of like one step further than there's necessarily been confidence would pass. It's asking voters to go a little bit further and not just enshrine the right itself, but actually to decide how it gets paid for, which is a little more controversial. We know there's a little bit more of a divide in the population about the Medicaid program in general and Medicaid funding from state to state. So it's definitely a significant move, and it's probably one that we'll see echoed in the future in other states.
I was just about to ask, will there be a copycat effect? And if so, which states are most likely to adopt a similar measure?
So I definitely think we first of all, there are funding protections in place, though not necessarily in the state constitution, in a number of states already. California has governmental public funding available, and a number of other more progressive and strongly abortion permissive states already do as well. But I do think this will be a significant shift, and we will see California, New York, and other more states that are more supportive of reproductive rights make moves like this. It always depends on sort of what the makeup of the legislature is at the state level, because obviously amending the Constitution is a big deal. But I do think we will absolutely be seeing this in, that Colorado is setting an example here that will be followed.
You just said amending a state constitution is a big deal, which is interesting because among the ballot measures we've seen tonight and in this election, some are proposing to amend a constitution. Others are simply just a poses a question. New York, for instance, question 1 was essentially asking us New York residents, I am one of them, to decide on whether or not people could be denied rights based on their ethnicity and background. It was kind of like a souped up ERA. Legally speaking, what's the benefit to doing a state constitutional amendment versus what we had in New York, which was voting on question number 1?
Well, so the Constitution is really the original source of rights in every state. We have a federal constitution and then state constitutions. And it's really a fundamental document that sets out the distinctive rights in that state. It's not easy to amend, right? It requires a significant amount of work to change. And so when you put something into the Constitution of the state, you are really like deeply embedding it and suggesting that it's going to be a permanent change. Ballot measures are a much more recent function, of our society. America, we certainly, George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and the founding fathers were not big fans of direct democracy, of letting people actually vote, right? We have, our system is completely representative. The voters choose the representatives other than the office president, and the representatives make the laws in Congress. So the ballot measure is a much more modern feature where we directly place an issue on the ballot for voters to approve and reject. I mean, what's good about it is it's a more straightforward way to let people vote. Although, here in California, I had to vote, I think, on something like 35 to 40 measures between the local and state ones. So it creates a complicated voting system, and it can easily be reversed in the next election cycle. So it's not permanent. It just puts the issue out there and can pass with the majority of votes, but it's not anything that is setting policy once and for all. When you see these constitutional amendments, they're going to be almost impossible to undo. So it's really a very different strategy for the from a legal advocacy standpoint, which to do. One gets you there faster, the other keeps you there longer.
Oh, that is such a good point. One gets you there faster, the other keeps you there longer, which I imagine is why some of these constitutional amendments come with a certain voter threshold. So for New York's question 1, I think it was a simple majority. In Colorado's amendment, it was a threshold of at least 55%. In Florida, we see a supermajority being required to pass Amendment 4. And as of this evening, it was looking with 91% of the vote in. 57% of Floridians had voted yes on Amendment 4. So can you talk about how significant it is when a state like Colorado votes yes, and also conversely when a state like Florida is looking like it votes yes, but just not enough?
Yeah, it's look, I think it's obviously if assuming that the Florida initiative doesn't pass that threshold that it needed, it does sort of keep the door open to a legal battle and potentially a fight over other restrictions. It sort of signals of where the citizens of Florida are standing and making it clear that there's not a decisive critical mass needed to enshrine the right, which is almost an invitation for it to be an issue. So I think in some ways it just leaves the issue unsettled, and also inherently these conversations about state constitutions are linking abortion very much to a right to privacy, and so it's also sort of leaving open this question of where the right to privacy ends on all kinds of other issues beyond reproductive health. So I do think this kind of is a sign that we're going to see Florida continue to be a battleground state with more back and forth efforts on abortion, really to see where what the public is willing to support.
Oh, that's interesting. The right to privacy we could see in other legal cases. Right now, I think our focus is on the ballot measures that folks are voting on tonight, but we'll have to dive into those other issues. But speaking of tonight, what else are you watching? What do you find most interesting as the results come in and as the American people let their voices be heard on this crucial reproductive health issue?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to see that here we are more than 2 years after the Supreme Court's decision in Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health, where Roe v. Wade was repealed, and we can see that reproductive rights are very much front and center in the public mind. And I do think voters are sending a message in these states, whether they're passing ballot measures or constitutional amendments. Voters are sending a strong message. This issue clearly mobilized voters. Obviously, when we're looking at the presidential race, we're going to see whether this issue was enough. But what we're seeing on the specific measures related to abortion is clearly the public energy to protect rights is there, and it's I think for people who support protection of reproductive rights, this is a positive sign about where the country is headed. It doesn't mean that the fight's going to be over. With this whole kind of complicated map around America of fighting this issue out state by state is going to continue, but it certainly is showing that the energy is there. This is an issue that is motivating voters and is likely to continue. So I think it's a positive trend. Whether it's enough to actually swing the presidential election is going to be something we're going to have to we'll find out.
And we'll be watching that exit polling, because some of the exit polling I've seen puts abortion not at the #1 issue. The economy is kind of outpacing it in some states, but we're still waiting, of course, for all the final results to come in. And when they do, you will have to come back and join us to further break down what we see. But in the meantime, Harry Nelson, founder of Nelson Hardiman, thank you so much for joining us and for sharing your insight with us.
My pleasure. Thanks so much for having me on.